As always, as we start today's talk, I want to address that if you want to skip it, there are chapters now. However, I do always appreciate those who stick around. I want to talk today about how we treat other people in our day to day lives. And as somebody who has had to deal with abuse from family members, it really shouldn't be that hard to simply treat your fellow human beings with respect and humility. And I think that's something a lot of people tend to forget. After all, as I've said before on this channel, we are all in this together in our own ways, and we are all striving to do the best that we can. Yes, we don't like each other. Yes, we may end up at odds with each other, but that doesn't mean we're any less of people. And whether you like someone or not doesn't give you the right to treat them any less than how you would want them to treat you. And it should always be strived to find a middle ground wherever possible. And if a middle ground can't be reached, then perhaps you don't need them in your life. As always, you are special. So keep following your dreams and just do your best. That's all we can do. With that said, let's jump right into the video. So, quite literally at the start of this level, I want to bring up the fact that the game actually calls up Bond's introductory animation twice. I'm not sure if this is a timing issue or just a coding issue. It could honestly also just be an issue with how it was put into the coding website. Although I don't currently have the knowledge of how the tools work to verify that information, but I did find that noteworthy. So immediately things are getting complicated in this level, and you'll just have to follow me for this. Near as I can tell, there are a total of 8 guards that will follow you across the level, 4 of which will always respawn and chase you down, those actors being 00 through 03. However, there are 4 more guards that will spawn based on the weapon that you're holding. Unfortunately, it is more likely for them to spawn if you are holding a weapon that is not found in the level than it is for you to be holding them. Or for some reason, the grenade launcher. And while there are increments, more silent weapons, except for the sniper rifle, will have the lowest chance of them to spawn, while noisier weapons will have the most chance. And of course, as mentioned before, if you're not holding any of those weapons, it's almost a guarantee for them to spawn. That said, though, as has become tradition in this series, this brings me to the grenade percentages, in which all the guards on this level have a 12 in 255 chance of throwing grenades, except those 4 guards in particular who were given a 191 out of 255 chance of throwing a grenade. Unfortunately, though, it is almost impossible to distinguish them from the 4 that would normally follow you around the level, except for the fact that these 4 guards are guaranteed to have a Clob and not a KF7. On the same topic as the KF7, though, there is an unused function which is supposed to spawn KF7 guards, and it's very possible it would have been a early version of the same code, or perhaps for the code that spawns the guards when the alarm is set off, but I cannot verify that. Of course, in this iteration of the level, you would most likely take out the Siberian guard that has the key to the comms room and then destroy the radio. However, I did note that the repository for the code online does have a slight issue in which it completely omitted the failure text for that objective. in which the guard on the other side of the radio says, "Da, what is wrong, comrade?" before flagging the objective as a failure. Of course, I don't believe this objective can be failed by any other way than you doing it yourself, but it is nice that they considered that as a sort of Easter egg. I do want to also talk again about the weird quirk in the coding that I had mentioned in the Surface 1 video, in which, for whatever reason, and somewhat very consistently, the guards in this level will run all the way around the fence, as you see here, instead of running directly at you. I'm not sure if this is in part due to the lack of vision on the level, preventing them from seeing you and thus causing the coding to fall back on assigning the pads. But it is funny to watch. While we're over here, I did want to talk about the choppa. And yes, I did call it a choppa. As some of you may know, though, there is a replica on the desk. And I had considered the idea of possibly sort of cheesing the objective for throwing the remote mine by using this replica instead of the real thing. However, it does seem like they took that into account, as the objective is based on the object number. In this case, object number 4, which doesn't match the model on the desk, and thus if you were to try, it would just fail. While we're on the topic of the chopper, though, I had noticed that the chopper kind of goes through segments in its destruction, as the game progressively destroys the metallic securing strips over the course of several seconds before eventually destroying the choppa as a whole. However, this is rather interesting, as I'm not sure if they planned the choppa to be destroyed over a much longer course of time, but several of the timestamps remain unused. Of course, once you complete the objectives, you'll likely initially run to the same entrance from the first iteration of the level, which has been welded off and thus cannot be entered. However, I did find it interesting that at the bottom, where you would have landed in the original version, there is a single pad which I don't believe has a use. I could be mistaken, and it could just be used to load the lower part of the level when you're standing from above, so that way it doesn't get cooled out by the game. But otherwise, that's the only explanation I can come up with as to why it would be down here. Lastly, once you do make it to the proper exit, though, in this case the main bunker doors, I suppose the developers wanted to be very thorough, and thus the game actually checks if you hit one of 5 different pads to verify that the level is over. Otherwise, this level does tend to be a very straightforward level, much the same as its previous iteration. I did, however, notice this bug here, where I threw a mine on the glass windows, and for whatever reason, it created a sort of graphical error. This also seemed to happen as well if there was smoke over the glass, so I'm not sure if that's what actually caused it, but I did find it worth noting nonetheless. That is, of course, all I have for you today, and I'm personally hoping that Bunker 2 will have a fair amount to talk about as well, besides just being more strategic. That all said, though, I do actually have a different video coming out soon. In this case, the second part of the Pokemon Infinite Fusions run, which I do plan to do different than the original video. I had done the first one much the same way that I do the Goldeneye videos, which was basically recording the footage and then recording the audio and then editing. However, I think with this one, I'm going to change it up a little bit and edit the video first and then do the recording over the footage so that way, hopefully, it will be a little less sporadic and more coherent in the long run. So I welcome you to look forward to that in the next couple days. With that said, though, I hope you have a fantastic evening. Bye bye.